She possessed the shoulders of a molting griffin buzzard, and that's why I wanted her. In the provoking years of her decrepitude, her wrists felt as deliciously crinkled as the eyelids of some comely sun-dried granny during the climax of Rigoletto. Whenever she performed Tai Chi exercises with the other Chinese senior citizens, or lowered herself into a hospital wheelchair, or flailed the air during a neurasthenic spell, her limbs creaked delicately like wicker armrests. Nights when we lay in bed together, pelvis to knee, she would roll toward me in a crisis of fatigue. In those moments, she looked so delectable. It was all I could do not to steal her wooden teeth and bury them in my sacred landfill. My rag heap, I would intone tenderly as she pretended to be awake. My disintegrating mummy, my crumpled bandage map. This piece, this is from a series, thank you so much. You don't know what it means to my insincere ability to cry on cue. This is from a series of books in a sort of a Victorian style that I've been writing for about 8 years, these little children's books, nostalgia books really, about the days when you could send your children off to labor camps and terrorize them in the name of the Lord, and all those perks of the Victorian period we don't have anymore. This is called Peekaboo in Purgatory. The habit of secrecy sullies we spirits. Discourage it sternly and banish. Tots from hideaways fear it and don't let them near it. Lest their call to be virtuous vanish. Every evening at dinner, small Tog is a sinner. When it rides free and crawls into shadow, it could die, but that's minor. The end point is finer. Death is merely eternity's ammo. Very late in the banquet, the baby's your anklet, floor swaddling as babies will do, itself into curious tangles of blanket, as if shamed by some moral snafu. Over that microcephalus hangs a perilous precipice called a table by those who diminish, by means of some slim tract, the grim fact of impact, which could tidily hasten Tog's finish. That's why you must reprimand Toggins, then step command it to remember the good book. Never hide from your parents. The Lord are inherently chastening beings who should look. And here, at last, since I saw it on the monitor behind me, is the first part of that piece that's in the festive Sensitive Skin magazine. Buy a copy today, even though it's free on your computer.
Buy one copy today, get the second Earl for free.
Exactly, second Earl for free. I like pronouncing URL Earl too. After failing to kill myself for the 18th time, I decided to be more positive. Why focus on failure, I thought? Why not appreciate the character added by damage to my once perfect body? But despite the pep talk, I still couldn't examine myself without cringing. It was like being a vintage car fanatic and finding bullet spray patterns on the hood of a Cherry Stingray. I was 20 years old. I hadn't even been out of the warehouse. Now it seemed there were worse things than having flawless skin in a case of insomnia. Tattered eyelids, for example, scalloped hollows in place of areolae. For weeks I stared at the rifle wounds and the diminishing slashes on the backs of my hand. They took on a shimmering orange glow like merthiolate applied over glitter tattoos. Whenever I slunk into a booth at the back of Cool Beans and tugged off the strangler gloves, my stitch-marked wrists gleamed like medicinal showroom dragsters. That seemed a bit precious for the neighborhood. You didn't want to be some book-warming hairboy in Denton County and go around gleaming. I thought I'd feel less out of place at some garish public event. The monster ambulance show I read about in The Observer, in which vehicles were supposed to look like burn victims with a platinum sparkle undercoat, so that, when shattered by some oncoming sadist, paint layers of metal flake in transparent blue, or coral the color of cough syrup, diluted blood, and curare, would parody the wounds of glitter bomb casualties. I liked the idea of erupted car flesh because I wanted to stop being human. I wanted to be merthiolate instead. I listed at the thought like a newborn, glistened like a flame-painted cherry ride. Watching myself heal, I imagined coating a racing car with a Red Death cast, pocked and speckled, as if for Ed Poe's final showroom. I tried to embed the axis of miniature flywheel into the design, but it kept falling out. Colloid formations grew so elaborate I knew the custom work was permanent. Other scars assumed the texture of serrated valve covers, still noticeable but less florid, less obscene. I liked looking at my scars in private, but they made me feel vulnerable. Turns out there were worse things than being conspicuous. Everywhere I went, people lost interest in me as soon as they paid attention. I told myself they were just intimidated, that they secretly craved my company but felt slightly overwhelmed. That wasn't it. Riding the A train from Med Park in one of those insular pockets within a crowd in which the faces of strangers upset and provoked me at the same time so that I couldn't stop noticing them but wanted to look away, I took solace in the physicality of those brittle human clusters, lurching and tilting in our car as if in a swaying necklace of tin capsules. Outside, tunnels unsheathed us, and then through the window, sunlight exposed a flat expanse. The space surrounded a dented sanctuary that rotated as it passed. The reversible image surrounding it described by trees slanting and stiffening in mid-gesture. These swept by too until, tinged by bluish window glass, starker trees covered it behind a metal fence. An emergency corralled forest of frozen horses. My irises too are stained glass, I thought to myself, batting my trashers at strangers assumed to be enticed by my Mishima torso. In my mind, I painted Modigliani eye smiles on my Roman observer's eggshell blanks. I didn't realize I'd misinterpreted. The train jumped forward, then stopped completely at the Trinity Mills station. Men I'd taken for antique cruisers disembarked the capsule impatiently, heels slippery with secondhand rain, thumbprints in grime swirling beneath their running shoes. Yes, I obsessed over changes in myself. I did it for months, savoring the seasons of red, blue, and black and the hand-distressed effect. But I wasn't being narcissistic. Solipsistically speaking, I had taken a vow of chastity. Avoiding self-scrutiny during seasons of pelvic pottery jollying, I found the restraint to focus on other people right when I came. The trick was to observe the slashes only in passing, and later to study myself only with an eye to clinical solutions, to apply my newfound sense of texture to everything I drew instead of myself. The doll sculptures that guarded my imaginary Romanesque water castles, to the cathedral port morgue as I saw it 2,000 years from now, as isolate as a water castle. Disengaging myself made me feel safe enough to reproduce what I observed like any monk, to align the process with a just glimpsed spiritual grid, an intuitive symmetry, an absolute form that could only be sensed.
Yeah.